exports to the United States for the entire month for the first time in 41 years. We've also seen new reports that the U.S. has just 41 days of crude oil inventory left. This is the lowest level in half a century. Before we get into this story about Iran and today's update about the Iran war, I want to remind you how many times we've seen massive fake outs by the Trump administration, and fake outs on these major, foreign policy decisions of war and peace are the utmost importance right now and necessity for the Trump administration, because this whole veneer of,
if the messages are real, I don't think they are to Dan Flood, but to B. Harpole.
Could be. Thank you, Diva, for the super chat. This whole veneer of catching the Iranians off guard, of some, unexpected attack, that's long gone and out the window. All right. There are no more surprise attacks, surprise moves against the Iranians, which I think is probably why we're now seeing the Trump administration try to, I guess maybe you could say, dupe the Iranians out. This is from Megatron. Trump is ending the war with Iran. U.S. diplomats are returning to the Middle East embassies. The U.S. State Department is preparing to return diplomats to several Middle Eastern embassies that were evacuated before and during the war with Iran, signaling that the Trump administration does not expect a return to full-scale fighting. Now, I think this is just a bit ludicrous to assume that because embassy staff is being redeployed, that this means that the war is coming to an end. If the war is coming to an end, don't you think that we would have just sent the USS Abraham Lincoln home and not replaced it with the USS George H.W. Bush? If the war was ending, don't you think that we would have told those Marine Expeditionary Units to go home? If the war was ending, don't you think we wouldn't be deploying the 82nd Airborne Division to the region right now? Okay, hear me out. Iran did not attack any embassies in this war. They're not going to. All right. They wouldn't do that even if their embassy was attacked, because we've already seen that happen. Before Operation True Promise 1, Israel bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria, and they killed, I believe they killed a general, and they killed also just regular civilian embassy staff. So they already did that. And it was in an extremely important country at the time. The Syrian government was still led by Bashar al-Assad at the time. They already did that, and Iran responded later with Operation True Promise 1, but they didn't respond by bombing embassies with civilian workers inside. I mean, that's just insane and demonic. So the idea that, the war is ending because Trump is sending more embassy staff back to the Mideast, I mean, no, that doesn't mean anything, actually, because I think we can all safely assume that Iran is not Israel, and they're not going to just start bombing embassies with wanton, disregard for civilian life. So I don't think that that's true. So this post was put out far and wide. A lot of people were talking about it, and I actually don't think it means what people are thinking it means. And also, we don't know the levels that they're sending. Or what are they sending, like 5 people? Are they sending 500 people? We don't know. Now, let's continue on here. The United States is continuously put out this threat over the past few days that they are going to launch Operation Economic D-Day against Iran, which I also believe it's been called Operation Economic Outcast. I don't know what they're calling it anymore. They've got all these different Epstein operation names. They're honestly pretty hilarious. Like the first move that they made was today with this Economic Outcast campaign. Very sad attempt. They put a new pressure on Iran by banning Iranians from academic exchanges in sports competitions. So now, because I guess Iranians can't play baseball in the United States and the MLB, they're going to bend the knee and give up their enriched uranium. This is the sort of high-level thinking we're dealing with this Trump regime right now. Anyways, we know that the big threat here is not more sanctions on Iran, because you really can't sanction Iran any more than they already are sanctioned. The threat are secondary sanctions. So the United States saying, hey, take a country, Georgia. Georgia. Take the country of Georgia. They have good relations with Iran. In fact, the Georgian president came to the funeral of Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Take Georgia, for example. I'm sure that they do a lot of trade with Iran. Hey, Georgian president, if your companies continue doing trade with Iran, we're going to start sanctioning you now. That's how secondary sanctions work. Doesn't mean that they're doing anything illegal. These are all unilateral sanctions, and Georgia would be well within its right to say, you can screw off, we don't care. But a lot of countries might not do that. A lot of countries might prefer to say, hey, we'd rather have good relations with the United States at this point in time than do a few $1 million in trade of soybeans with Iran or something like that. Now, a country that is not doing a small amount of trade with Iran, who has obviously been the primary target of these secondary sanctions, is China. And China is not bending the knee. China officially announces it does not accept U.S. sanctions against Iran as part of Trump's economic D-Day, saying China opposes illicit unilateral sanctions that lack basis in international law. And China believes that military means, sanctions, and pressure tactics are not the solution, per China's MFA spokesperson, Lin Jian. China has also directly rejected the U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent's call yesterday for China to join the U.S. in putting strong economic pressure on Iran. So China's been very strong, very clear. They said, we're not going to play around with this. You guys apply your secondary sanctions on us if you want. We don't care. We're going to keep trading with Iran. So this is, it gets even crazier. So the idea of doing this whole secondary sanction thing, I mean, what is that going to do? It's just going to speed up in a very big way. It's going to accelerate de-dollarization worldwide, globally. Look at Russia. Russia's fine. Russia's fine. Iran, I think if they made a few policy adjustments, I think if they had a little bit of a different idea with their economics, right, and a less reformist, less liberal economics, I think that they'd probably be fine right now as well. And, China has a lot of sanctions against them. They're fine. I mean, their GDP purchasing power parity is $5 trillion larger than the United States is each and every year. And it's just going up and up and up. Whereas the United States is not going up at such a rate. And this is going to accelerate de-dollarization worldwide. Now, just when you thought it couldn't get even more insane, it does. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent comes out and announces that any country that helps Iran will be removed from the U.S. dollar system. Any country that supports Iran in any form globally, including China, should now be prepared to face U.S. sanctions, and countries that stick with Iran will be isolated alongside them, as Trump is now making phone calls to world leaders to cut economic ties with Iran. Bessent adds that the new U.S. economic campaign targeting Iran has been officially dubbed Operation Economic Outcast, and the U.S. is enforcing a zero leakage approach to Iran sanctions. Now, this doesn't even make any sense to me because, okay, how are you going to enforce that? Think about how many U.S. Treasury bills China has at their disposal. What are you going to do? What is the United States going to do? Tell China that they have to sell their U.S. Treasury bonds? What would that do to the global economy? It would implode overnight. It would implode just at the thought of that. What about Iraq? Iraq will plummet into a complete failed state. Did you know that all of Iraq's oil revenue first has to pass through it's on the tip of my tongue. Why am I having a brain fart right now? It has to pass through the Fed, has to pass through the Federal Reserve. All of Iraq's oil revenue first passes through the Federal Reserve, and then it's given back to Iraq in dollars. So you're telling me that Iraq, who relies on Iran in their hottest months for electricity, which we're kind of in the midst of right now, and we're going to be even more in the midst of in the next few weeks, you're telling me that Iraq, who has, great ties with Iran, they do a lot of business, you're telling me that they're going to have to cut all ties with Iran, or else you're going to just what? You're going to keep all their oil revenue. I mean, this whole thing is ludicrous, insane, and could never actually be implemented. Zero leakage approach. It's really cute how they say that. Anyways, I think what everyone should know here is that if anyone has the capacity to harm someone else's economic standing, it is Iran to the United States. We've already seen that Saudi Arabia has had zero oil exports to the United States for the entire month for the first time in 41 years. We've also seen new reports that the U.S. has just 41 days of crude oil inventory left. This is the lowest level in half a century. All right. You know who doesn't have record low, oil reserves at the moment, and who has oil reserves that could power them for the next 9 months if they wanted to? China. China has that. And China is going to keep buying oil from Iran. They do not care what Trump says, what Scott Bessent says, Scott Bessent, what a guy, He's another one of these guys who married another man and he adopted 2 little baby boys. Nothing strange about that. Anyways, so Iran is, of course, they're like trying to just deal with this madness because the whole thing doesn't make sense. It can never be implemented. Iran is allowing Iraqi tankers to travel through the Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, they have good brotherly relations with the nation of Iraq. And as for Iran's capability of hurting America's economics, well, how many of you followed the Iran war closely? I mean, Iran mostly limited their attacks to military targets. Okay, some like CIA HQs were hit, but it was mostly military targets that were hit by the Iranians. A lot of military bases. In fact, the only time you saw Iran not hit a military target was when the United States or a Gulf ally of the United States hit something in Iran that was very important, clearly crossing a red line, that Iran had warned about first. Like when there were ground-to-ground missile strikes, I believe from Kuwait, that hit Iranian electrical infrastructure, power infrastructure, and desalination plants on one of their islands off the coast. And Iran responded by targeting on 4 or 5 separate occasions Kuwaiti power infrastructure and desal plants. So that's the only time Iran did that. I went to one of the major universities in the center of Tehran when I was there, and they had a major GPU center at, I think it was Sharif University. It was blown up. It was like something crazy, like $200 million in GPUs were blown up by the United States in an airstrike. And what does Iran do? They responded by blowing up an Amazon GPU facility in the UAE. So that was the only time Iran did that. So you're telling me that this is somehow a good idea for the United States to declare economic war on Iran when all of the United States' most precious financial assets are just sitting out in the open in the region with no protection whatsoever, as we've seen. If they can't protect a military base, God only knows what it's going to look like when Iran starts striking these financial assets, these major oil and gas networks, these financial hubs, these GPU centers, whatever it may be. It's going to be really, really bad for the United States. Everything will just get lit up in a matter of hours, and they're not going to be able to do a damn thing about it. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait, Bahrain are beginning to understand this and the real threats that are coming down the line if the U.S. moves forward with this economic war and the threats that Iran is making, right? They've all come begging to Iran, privately reaching out for new security arrangements, sending multiple messages almost daily to Iran out of concern that the U.S. cannot protect them anymore due to interceptor shortages and the vulnerability of hosted U.S. bases, per Iran's Parliament Speaker Ghalibaf and a senior Iranian source in Tehran familiar with the matter. So they're coming out and begging now, saying, Iran, please don't hurt us. The UAE has sent over $6 billion either in cold hard cash and gold bars back to Iran so they can get preferential security agreements above the other Gulf states. This is the future. They are all begging Iran for forgiveness. Sooner or later, if Trump keeps pushing, he's going to be the one begging for forgiveness as well. Now, Iran was presented with a new set of statements, negotiations, maybe some begging from President Trump this week. Actually, yesterday, late last night, Iran time, by the one, the only Pakistani Field Marshal Asim Munir. He came to Tehran, put forward some new proposals, and Iran rejected them. Iran has rejected a new U.S. proposal to resume negotiations, according to Iranian media reports. Pakistan reportedly presented a new ceasefire proposal and negotiation platform to Iran.
Thanks for your great courage and work, Jackson. Keep going.
Thank you so much for the super chat. According to Iranian state media, the proposal was rejected as the U.S. continues to impose hardline sanctions on the country. So Iran came out during the meeting between Asim Munir and Dr. Ghalibaf. Iran's preconditions for reopening the strait were discussed. The Pakistani mediator, while conveying the Trump regime perspective, received Iran's viewpoint on the way forward. The first step of which is for the U.S. to implement those preconditions, which would be, of course, lifting the blockade, lifting the sanctions, removing their troops from the region, so on and so forth. Iran has been quite clear about this. Well, the Iranians, 24 hours later, they came out with a new preliminary agreement with Oman. Oman's leaders have publicly confirmed this information that, yes, we have a new practical arrangement, an agreement for a temporary corridor in the Strait of Hormuz and safe navigation. Iran has said, yes, this is all fine and well, but everything is hinging upon the idea that the United States ends their naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Joint statement by Iran and Oman. This was put out a few hours ago. Technical talks continue between the two sides with the aim of reaching agreement on a permanent maritime corridor and the future management of the Strait of Hormuz, as well as a mechanism for information exchange, traffic management, and the provision of related maritime and security services. Now, like clockwork, Trump comes out and says, oh, we've cleared all of the mines in the Strait of Hormuz, and this is all by the might and power of the U.S. Navy, and it has nothing to do with the fact that, me putting out this statement has nothing to do with the fact that the Iranians and the Omanis just put out a temporary agreement on the Strait of Hormuz moving forward. And the Strait of Hormuz is open for business, everybody. Go out and sail through. See for yourself. Everything is fine and dandy. Trump says, I've just been informed by the U.S. Navy that all mines have been removed and or detonated from within the international waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has been notified that any ship or boat placing new mines will be immediately and systematically destroyed. I like how he talks tough as soon as the Omani-Iranian agreement came out, right? Because just last night, Iran was still striking ships that were trying to illegally cross the Strait of Hormuz, as they have been doing each and every day of this memorandum of understanding. So what can I say? All of the cards are still within Iran's hands, and Trump is desperate for some sort of a victory. Of course, he can only score these temporary victories. He can only lower the price of oil for a few days or hours. And he did accomplish that by putting out that Truth Social post a few hours ago. Price of oil per barrel went down to $82. Memory serves correct. Yeah, $82 price of barrel. But this is, it's just like a seesaw going back and forth, and there is no end in sight for Trump until he admits defeat. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.